Dr. Peterson, I feel like we're living in a time where technology is basically doing the impossible. It's honestly the most privileged time to ever be alive, especially in the West. But at the same time, we're seeing a massive wave of young people like me getting radicalized.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
There's this feeling that the whole system is just broken. And everyone is falling into this us versus them, black and white way of thinking. Like, you see it in places like the UK, Canada, and even Japan, where people are struggling to get along, or the government is stepping in to tell everyone what they can and can't say. And knowing you're a scientist who has been dragged through the mud and targeted just for sticking to biological and historical facts, how do you see all of this fitting into globalism? Is this push to make the whole world exactly the same? What's actually causing the damage? Why does it feel like the more privileged and connected we get, the more people just want to burn it all down?
Oh, good question. Well, first and foremost, you've got to wrap your head around the staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of what Western civilization has actually achieved. We aren't just talking about a few clever gadgets or some superficial comforts. We're talking about the systematic decoding of the physical world that has rescued billions of souls from the brink of starvation and abject misery. We've effectively conquered the ancient grinding problem of scarcity, and in that triumph, we've inadvertently opened a psychological abyss.
But if life is so much easier now, and we've basically won the survival game, why are we so miserable? Why is everyone so angry and looking for a fight when we've literally never had it better?
Now, look, when a society finally hits this level of, well, let's call it what it is, this almost miraculous prosperity, you end up with a radical degree of material privilege. And that sounds great on paper, right?
Right.
But it hands the individual this massive, unallocated chunk of cognitive space. And the fundamental problem is this: if you aren't tethered to something heavy, if you aren't carrying a real responsibility or pushing yourself towards some difficult, transcendent goal, that extra cognitive space doesn't just sit there in peaceful gratitude. It doesn't work that way. Your mind turns on itself. It only gets restless and resentful. It starts hunting for a grievance to inhabit, and if it can't find a real monster to slay, it'll go right ahead and invent one just to have something to do with all that mental energy. And you have to understand something critical about the scale of this. Even in these countries that seem overrun by indoctrinated, ultra-leftist ideology, those radicals are in almost every case a tiny minority. They've managed to cluster in certain major urban centers where that brand of liberalism has become the local religion. And because they own the digital megaphone, they appear to be everywhere. They are the loudest voices in the room, and they use that volume to create an illusion of consensus. And let's be clear, this is being manufactured in the universities. These places have become absolute hubs for these ideologies. You know, I saw it firsthand at the University of Toronto. You have entire departments that have traded the pursuit of truth for social engineering, taking impressionable kids and feeding them a diet of resentment and postmodern nonsense.
Oh my God, I totally get that. Actually, I was in college until 2012, and even then, it was shocking to see. It really felt like everyone was majoring in these studies that didn't even make sense in the real world. I noticed that guys were becoming a total minority on campus, and this really aggressive brand of feminism was just taking over everything. And I remember a close friend of mine, like a friend I knew from second grade, kept trying to entice me to drop my history major and switch over to gender studies. When I finally just said no and refused, the fallout was crazy insane. I was completely ostracized by my friend group. They actually started calling me a fascist just for wanting to stick to history. But in a weird way, I mean, that's how I ended up finding much more reasonable friends, people who were going through the exact same kind of thing and realized the whole situation had gone off the rails. And funny thing enough, in my newly established friend group, most of them were actually boys. Like, I want to say 70% of them.
Well, exactly. You've just described the pathology of the modern campus. And it's a tragedy because the vast majority of people, the sensible, working class people who keep the world spinning, don't buy into this bullshit for a second.
Yes.
They know it's nonsense, but they don't have the guts to speak out. And you can hardly blame them.
Right.
They've seen what happens. They see cancel culture acting as a digital guillotine, ready to take the head off anyone who dares to point out that the emperor has no clothes. So they stay silent. And that silence allows the radical fringe to dictate the moral direction of the entire culture. And we see this most destructively in the modern obsession with gender politics. We've reached a point where we are so insulated from the harsh realities of nature that we think we can simply deconstruct the most fundamental biological categories that have guided our species for millions of years. It's a form of collective delusion.
It's like we've traded actual science for what people want to be true. It's kind of cringe, honestly. We're like ignoring basic reality just to be polite, or because we're afraid of the mob coming for us.
We've replaced the objective scientific reality of sexual dimorphism with a subjective narcissistic ideology that insists your feelings are the ultimate arbiter of truth. This is the byproduct of a globalist ethos that seeks to iron out all biological and cultural distinctions in favor of a flat, manageable, and ultimately soulless equity. And look, this is what happens when you have too much time and not enough reality. We've turned the biological dance between the masculine and feminine, which is the very engine of creation, into a battlefield of oppression and power dynamics. It's an attempt to legislate away the inherent differences that make us human, and it's being pushed by people who have never had to face a real physical threat in their entire lives. They've mistaken their comfort for the right to rewrite the laws of nature. This is the breeding ground for the radicalization we're seeing today. You have a generation of young people who are, by any historical metric, the most empowered and protected people to ever exist. Yet they are possessed by a toxic narrative of generational betrayal. They look at the inevitable inequalities that emerge in any productive, competence-based hierarchy. And rather than seeing the brilliance and the hard work that built the system, they see only tyranny.
And you see this playing out differently depending on the vibe of the country. In some places, the government is straight up using the law to force people into this, right? Like, this globalist push for mass immigration is totally changing the landscape. A friend of mine who lives in the UK confirmed that parts of London are basically practicing Sharia law now. Like, seriously. So, in districts with high concentrations of Muslims, they've emplaced these rules, and there are multiple cases of people throwing rocks at random bystanders, or specifically at non-Muslim women who aren't wearing hijabs. How crazy is that? It's like the local laws just don't apply in those bubbles anymore.
Yep. And it's made 1,000 times worse in places like the Commonwealth, where you don't even have a robust, legally protected freedom of speech. Look, if you can't speak, you cannot think. And if you cannot think, you cannot self-correct. When the state begins to curate what is acceptable to say under the guise of compassion, telling you which pronouns you must use or which biological facts you cannot state, they aren't just policing manners, they are lobotomizing the collective intelligence of the culture. It accelerates the descent into that black and white ideological possession, because the wrong ideas are simply driven underground, where they ferment and turn into something truly demonic. That's why the United States stands as the last bastion of near absolute speech. It is the only place on earth where the right to speak the truth, including biological truth, is still codified as a primary, non-negotiable value. There is still a massive, silent portion of the population there that is profoundly rational. You know, like people who are still oriented toward reality and competence rather than a utopian fantasy. Now, you also have to look at a place like Japan, because it offers a profound counterexample Japan is a miracle of technological sophistication and ancient tradition. It's a society that has managed to integrate modernity without completely severing its roots. But Japan is facing its own unique crisis. It's a culture of profound collective harmony. But the danger is that the pressure to conform can be so immense that the individual, the person who needs to stand up and speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, gets suppressed into silence. In both the West and the East, we've traded the hard-won tool of critical thinking for a low-resolution ideological possession. And while Japan doesn't have the same woke versus anti-woke dynamic we see in the West, scholars like Saito, Kohei Saito, have rightly pointed out a rise in this kind of low-resolution nationalist rhetoric and a total decline in youth political engagement. It's the same problem manifesting differently. The individual stops thinking critically and just adopts a prepackaged identity. It's a classic Marxist sleight of hand, the idea that if you just demolish the existing order, a classless, genderless utopia will spontaneously emerge from the ruins. It's an act of supreme intellectual arrogance. It's the attempt to fix the world before you've even begun the agonizingly difficult work of rectifying your own character. We are essentially using the intellectual inheritance of the Enlightenment to dismantle the very foundations that support us. It's a civilizational suicide pact born out of the luxury of not having a real enemy to fight. We've traded meaning for comfort, and we're discovering to our horror that comfort is not a substitute for a life oriented toward truth.